Morning everyone. Would you believe it? It is the third time that I have recorded this video. The first one got lost. The second one recorded everything apart from my voice, so it was just a load of stuff on the screen. And now I'm hoping, third time lucky, this actually works and you get this before the end of the day. So the technical issues are still alive and well and here today. So I apologise for the delay in getting this to you. As soon as I finish recording it, I'm going to get it to you without even editing it. Okay, so I'm going to get the raw deal. Right, today's plan is task 3. So on Thursday, you're going to have task 2, which is your debugging and your test plan. But I'm pretty confident with what you've done with that. So I don't want to spend time on that today because we've kind of covered it a few times. But if you've got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, task 3, which is going to be your designing a solution, your flowchart or pseudocode one. We've not touched on this too much yet, so that's why I wanted to go through it today. So what you're going to get given is a brief overview of what the user wants. You're going to get given some data so you know what data you're working with, and you're going to create a series of flowcharts or pseudocode to deal with that problem, okay? So let's have a look at the brief here. So you'll get a printed copy of this. It'll obviously tell you what you can and can't do, and then it'll tell you what the brief is and then what you have to create. So you've got to create some algorithm designs that show how you would communicate the solution to your client, okay? You need to save this as a PDF, and obviously the same naming conventions as you did yesterday. Now this is the solution that you need to create a design for. It has to allow a user to select a flight route and show the trends for passenger numbers over time. Be easy to use, display information in a meaningful way, and make use of textual, numerical and graphical output. Now you're probably thinking, well, this is task 4A that we did the other day, and you would be right, okay? So this feeds into task 4A, okay? So once you've got this next week, you'll be able to get an idea of what you're going to have to develop as part of task 4A. But essentially, at this point in the project, you won't have seen task 4A. So you've got a bit of an advantage that you've already seen task 4A for this, and you know what some of those functions are and how it's roughly going to work. But obviously when you do this for real, you won't have any idea what the animal charity task 4A is yet, okay? But it does feed into it, and hopefully it will give you an idea of what they're looking for, okay? So that's our brief. Let's have a look at the data they've given us. And again, you've seen this before. So this is our CSV file, and we can see we've got our departure airport, our destination airport, a number of dates, and then the number of passengers that travelled on that route on that day. So for example, on the 1st of April 2022, there were 154 passengers that went from Dublin to London Heathrow. Day after it was 159, day after 158, etc, etc, etc. Okay, and you want to allow the user to choose their departure airport, the destination airport, a number of days worth of data, and then show them the number of passengers or the trend of passengers over that time. Okay, so then we're going to go back to our mark scheme. Okay, so what we're going to do as part of that is I'm just going to show you what the exam board is looking for. All right, so you've got 3 bands as usual, and there are 3 parts to this. So the first thing is the decomposition of the problem. So what they're not going to want you to do for this task is submit one giant flowchart or one giant pseudocode. They're going to want to see you break it down into parts. I would suggest breaking it down into those functions that you've seen already in the code. So you'll have one function, which is essentially the user choosing their departure airport, one function which is them choosing their destination airport, one function which is the number of days, then a section for obviously creating the data frame and the extracted data, and then another section which is presenting it back and finishing off the menu essentially. But I'd also include a general overview. So you'd have a general pseudocode or flowchart, which is just the problem as a whole before you then break it down into parts, okay? So they're going to want to see how you've done that. That's the most marks. The second most marks is how you've approached that. So how your logic works, how the bits bolt together, how the user's taken through the whole system, and how things are presented back to them, okay? So that's worth up to 6 marks. And then the third part is how you present it back to them. So if you just say, give them 6 flowcharts without any title or any context, that's probably going to be pretty poor because it doesn't show them, you know what it means, but the person you're giving it to won't. So you need to make sure that they're linked, they're given titles. If you've got a sub-process defined, that you use that sub-process title when you create the next one, okay? And we'll see some examples of that in a second, all right? So just make sure that's all logical. So moving on from that, let's have a look at some examples, shall we? So here is some pseudocode examples, and you can see here they put them into 3 different boxes. This isn't all of them, this is just some examples, okay? So the first thing they've got here is a sub-process called get and validate departure airport choice. And you see here they've used their pseudocode to display that. So they haven't done the whole program, they've just got this departure airport choice. Then they've got get and validate the start date, as well as casting that into a date format. And then lastly, they've got the data based on the number of days of data required, okay? So this is something that comes later on once you've already got that start date and the departure airport and the destination airport. But you can see here that all of the variable names are the same, okay? They're carried on throughout it, and they're also using these formal tones in there, okay? So your if, your else, send, receive instead of print and input, and you can see here that a lot of these are similar to what we use when we're coding Python. But I will show you the agreed conventions for pseudocode and flowcharts from the exam board. So let's have a look at some flowcharts. So again, on this one, they have given you an overview of the whole project. So you've always got your start and stops. These are your sub-processes. So you see here, get departure airport. This is its own flowchart. And you can see here, get departure airport is duplicated along the top here. And then they have created that flowchart underneath, okay? So you'll see anything where you've got a sub-process will need its own flowchart coming out of it. And those will all be presented together, okay? So I would put this one first and then have all of your sub-processes underneath it, making sure that they are clearly labelled the same. You could even colour code them if you wanted to, okay? As long as it's clear to the examiner where everything bolts together at the end, all right? So let's have a very quick look at the agreed conventions. So you can see here that we have got our flowchart symbols. Okay, so you've always got the terminator at the start and the end. Make sure you've got the start. People tend to remember the start but forget the end. So everything needs to start from here and end in the same box. Okay, you can't have things that just stop midway through your flowchart. Any singular process will be in here. So if it's just like a standard multiplication, it'll be done in there. If there's a series of steps involved, aka another function, then it needs to go in one of these sub-process boxes, and that will need its own flowchart to follow, okay? Decisions have to be Boolean, so true, false, yes, no. So is input between 1 and 5? Yes, no, okay? It can't just be how are you feeling today? Great, really good, not bad. Yes, it has to have a Boolean output. Inputs or outputs from the user. So this is your input functions, and your print functions will all go in the parallelogram. So this one here is how you connect everything together, okay? So the flow of your data through the flowchart. And then lastly, we have got the pseudocode, okay? So this is the agreed pseudocode, and you can see here you got your data types on here, how you change them, the constants, which you won't have to worry about for this, structures, so how you define array, dictionary, strings, comments are with a hash, so that's similar to what you're used to. And then they've got some examples on here, okay? So set variable to, obviously we don't tend to do that in Python, but that's what they'll like to see in here. Now, what I would say if you're using pseudocode is choose a method and stick to it. Okay, you're not going to remember all of these, but as long as you're consistent as you go through, that's fine. Now, some things are the same, so if and else is exactly the same, you just don't have any of the semicolons to worry about, okay? And the indentation is not quite as intense as it usually is, all right? But just stay consistent as you go through. Same with the loops as well. They're pretty much the same as what they would be. Big differences with send and receive. So send is essentially print, and receive is the same as input. And then obviously your read and write from your files are slightly different as well. But obviously I've uploaded a copy of that, so do take a look. Whatever you do, be consistent and present it in a way that the user is going to be able to understand, because you understand it. But imagine giving someone a load of flowcharts and asking them to try and decipher what goes with what. So if you've got a sub-process, make sure you name it the same when you then create the flowchart for that sub-process. Same with your pseudocode. Make sure you've labelled the parts clearly where you've got a sub-process happening like they did in the mark scheme, okay? So we're going to come back together at 11:30, and then we're going to go through your ideas, and then we'll come back together again just before the end of the session to see how you're getting on. All right? Any problems, just let me know. Okay, speak to you later. Bye-bye.